Okay, here we go. And here we go. We are back for another week of Stand Up Explained. I am one of your hosts, Brandt Tobler.
I am one of your other hosts, Andrew Slater.
I don't know how I'm not good at that double host intro. I don't know how to do that, but we are Brandt Tobler and Andrew Slater, and we are here to explain some stand up to you today. Today's question is, how do you deal with hecklers? Which is another question I get all the time. I don't know about you, Andrew, but people are always like, what do you do with a heckler? What happens with a heckler?
Yeah, people are so
And
fascinated by this idea. I think it's because they kind of thought about heckling during the show. So they're like, what if I had yelled that thing I thought out? Would he have been able to stop me?
yeah, so we should address this right up front. You are never helping the comedian. That's one of my biggest annoyances or pet peeves or whatever you want to call it, is after the show, once I deal with a heckler and then they're like, hey, are you welcome? That really helped the show. I'm like, it did not help the show at all. We got through it, but I did not need your help.
Right. And then it's like they mistake like, oh, but there was like the biggest laugh came when you dealt with it. Yeah, but it was like still an obstacle. It's
Yeah.
like it didn't help. It was just like, yeah, it went okay, but there's 1,000 ways it could not go okay. And you might have like interrupted the momentum that I would have gotten to a bigger laugh anyway.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, okay, they did get a bigger laugh, but if you wouldn't have messed up the momentum, what was coming was the
Right.
end of the story that would have got a much bigger laugh, which is something I worked on, or just simple inside comedy stuff of like if you're filming or something, it just ruins a whole half of this business is you're trying to get a good tape to send to a festival or to get on TV or something, and nothing's more frustrating than having a heckler right in the middle of it. But we'll just start with simple stuff of you know to be honest, I don't. The heckling, it's kind of stopped. I mean, I don't. As far as in comedy clubs, they do a pretty good job of policing it, at least for me.
Some, I don't know.
Oh, have you had some bad ones?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a fine art, because people now like go on Reddit and they love these heckler destroys or comedian destroys heckler is the way it's supposed to go. Comedian destroys heckler videos. And I think what the people have taken from that is that, and when I started, you'd see this a lot from Road Dogs or whatever. They would just go so crazy in on the heckler. Like they get so mad and like call them like the worst names in the world and like keep going and going and going till they left, and it's like, that's one way to do it. That is a way to do it, to make sure that you like quote unquote beat the heckler, but that's going to totally derail the show. Like no one else will get any enjoyment out of that except to say, hey, I was there that night that comedian lost his mind on stage and
Yeah.
had a coronary, you know what I mean? But there is like, I think it is kind of a fine art to disarm and disable a heckler without, and still being able to go back into your show and do the show that you came wanting to do.
Yeah, that's some. Yeah, I was the latter. What you said is, I have a problem of when I think I'm right, so just not letting it go. And definitely earlier in my career, and actually the last heckler I dealt with, not the last one I dealt with, I went way too far on, and I should have just let it go. And it's when the crowd was like, just tell jokes, and I was so, but I guess it's just I got so fired up that I just wanted to keep going at him, and then he kept going at me a little bit, and then, but I agree with you. The best way to handle it, just address it. You're gonna get the big laugh, and then keep it moving.
Well, and there's actually, that's funny you mentioned that, because we've both probably felt that, where you're going in on somebody and you start to feel this restlessness from the rest of the crowd because they don't care as much as you think that they care. You think that they're going to be so interested in and once you go back and forth once, then it's like maybe they pop off again, you go back and forth again. And then it's like anytime you ask a question and then they're drunk or whatever, and it takes them more than like 30 seconds to get an answer out. Like, well, actually, before that, I was living at my sister's house. And you're like, the rest of the crowd is like, because they can't really hear them. And it's like, it's too long,
Yeah.
You got to go in and out. and then get out, and like either be willing to ignore the next like little outburst or get them kicked out. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like eventually the only way you can win is if they leave. And so that's when people go like nuclear. But I just think that's you're basically sacrificing that show when you do
Yeah.
that.
Well, even just thinking about that, I guess we should just go over that. There's different kind of hecklers. I mean, everybody thinks of the heckler that's just like boo or you suck, which for me was that last one. And that's when I take it too far. But a lot of times I guess a heckler would be like, sometimes it's an audience member having a lot of fun, but they just want to chime in after every joke or like
Right.
agree with you out loud, or it's just, I mean, I think the worst kind of heckling is someone who is a fan of yours, who's enjoying themselves, but they don't realize how much they're disrupting the show by just being talkative
Right.
loud.
Well, and then they'll say things like, "That's so true."
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, okay, thank you, but you just stepped on the punchline. They're like, "Oh, remember you did that?" And it's like, no, I don't need. Yeah, and you feel bad because they're just like, it's like a little dog that pees on the carpet. Like, you don't want to be mad. It doesn't know any better, but
Yeah,
it should know better.
Yeah, I would say that's the worst one for me, is like when someone's really enjoying the show, but they're just drunk and they want to talk about how much they're enjoying the show, and then having them get kicked out. I'm like, oh man, they ruined their night. And that one happened.
Right.
I had a funny one happen like that. I was hosting for Ari Shafir here at Comedy Works. And, Ari's got a big fan base, and these people were waiting outside to see him, probably waiting outside an hour. And, they're all drunk or probably on drugs or whatever. They're having a good time. It was definitely a fun crowd. And I'm come out of the host. And this guy's just sitting like dead center about 5 rows back. And he sees me and he just goes, "You're not Ari Shafir." And I was like, oh God. And I go, "Hey man, I'm just going to tell you this. If you don't be quiet, you're not going to get to see Ari. So I know you're here to see Ari. We're just going to do a little stuff up front. Just please keep it down. I know you're here to see Ari. I want you to see Ari." And then he made a couple more remarks. And before I brought up the feature, I gave him one more chance. I was like, "Hey man, Ari's coming, but in the meantime," it was like a great feature. I want to say it was like Mike Vecchione or someone. It was a great show. So I was like, "Hey man, just be cool. Ari's coming." And then of course, when I came back out to introduce Ari, I look and there's an empty chair, and I was just like, oh no, this poor guy. It wasn't.
Right.
It was like the good bad heckle of like. But I mean, I get it. He was ruining the show around him, but I felt so bad for him. But yeah, I think in these times everybody's a little more well behaved. Well, I speak from experience here at Comedy Works, because they don't really tolerate it. They give you like one warning and then you're out.
Yeah,
But
I mean, that's the way it should be. I just think like a lot of these clubs, they're so scared of the customer too. Like they clubs that do really well and they sell a lot of tickets and drinks and stuff, they can kick people out no problem. But a lot of these clubs, they're living week to week, and they need every last dollar.
Yelp review to Yelp review. They're worried about
yeah,
Yelp
exactly.
Which is funny because that happens at Comedy Works a lot. People get kicked out, and I'll be like standing by the bar at the back when they're getting kicked out, and they'll be like, "I'm going on Yelp. I'm telling everybody," and I'm always just like, "Hey, we pretty much sell out every show, so if you don't come, it's not really gonna." And it just busts their bubble. They're like, "But my mom and my lawyer." I was like, "Well, we don't really care. Like, we have lawyers, and we're gonna sell out every show." So here's a little advice: if you do heckle, just when you get kicked out, just leave, because you're gonna report it.
And here's some advice: if you want to be an asshole at a comedy club, go to a struggling one, and they probably will tolerate it longer.
Yeah. And to be honest,
they'll put up with a lot more as long as you're still ordering drinks. I had the club where I started, it was towards the end of the days where they needed every last dollar, put it that way. And the owner, he liked every last dollar. So one time our mutual friend Brian Moot was on stage and he was getting heckled like crazy from this table at Giggles in Seattle, is the name of the club. And he's just getting heckled, and it's like one of those things where he's good with dealing with it, but then he's dealing with it too much. He's interacting too much, and they're drunk, and so then they start. The one dude, he's like coming on stage every once in a while to like bear hug Brian or like mess around with him, and Brian's like game, he's a big dude, but he's playing off of it and trying to keep him off stage and continue the show while this big dude is running. And then Brian makes a joke. He starts building a wall. So he puts a stool and the table, and he starts building a wall in front of him to like keep him from attacking. And there's no one in the room to stop this dude from coming on stage. There's no bouncer, no security. Yeah. And finally, the owner, Terry, comes in, and he's like, and he starts walking over that table. And Brian's like, finally, some security. Let's get these guys out of there. And Terry's bringing him another round of Jaeger bombs.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, I see what the priority is.
You guys, if you continue to listen to the show, you're gonna get a lot of the business of this, and you can never forget it's a business.
It's a business.
And trust me, these club owners and bars or wherever you do shows, like Andrew said, a lot of times they'd rather have you off stage because you're not making them any money instead of kick out somebody who's going to continue to spend money even if they are yelling stuff.
Right. So I guess just to get back to like the core. Okay. So when it's so there's that first type of heckler who just doesn't even, they're not trying to hurt the show. They think they're helping, or they think they're just having fun, and to go too hard at them too quick. Because the key to everything with dealing with a heckler is just as long as you have the rest of the crowd on your side, you can really do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And they're going to want to be on your side. Yeah. The rest of the crowd wants to be on your side. And the only way you're going to lose them is by not dealing with it at all. Because then they go, why isn't this comic, he or she, why aren't they acknowledging what's going on? Why isn't anyone talking about that? That bothers them, I think. And also, if you go too hard, if it doesn't justify, if they think it's like the punishment doesn't meet the crime or whatever, then they might go, wow, that guy lost his mind. So
that's for sure. And that's when comics ask me and they're so worried about it, I go, exactly what you said. First of all, you have a microphone. They don't. You are probably sober with a clear mind, and you're naturally funny when they probably aren't. And the crowd is rooting for you. So there's no reason to fear it. You'll be fine. You know, people are always like, should I go to open mics and practice, or should I have people? I was like, no, just in the moment, be confident that just be yourself, be funny. And then, but then don't go too far. And here's something that's changed over the years, at least for me in my experience, because if you ask comics, most of the time they'll say like a disaster audience is full of a bachelorette party because they're drunk and they want the attention to be on them. And when I started in Vegas, you could be brutal to women. Just you could say the most awful things. And from my experience, I don't do it anymore. I learned the hard way. And I've seen it go bad. Like if you have a woman heckling you, you really have to tread lightly, because they, as obnoxious as they are, if you make one comment about like their physical appearance or anything, the crowd will turn on you. Like you could say the most brutal shit to a man. You could say, you fat slob, awful outfit. But I mean, that's why I'm curious what your take would be. How do you handle a woman heckler?
It's the same way I handle a man, because what I've learned is, rather than like them saying something to me like, you're not funny, right? Or what would a heckle be like? You suck, or that's not
next,
true, or
like,
whatever. Next,
Or like
what I next is a pretty brutal one. If you want to heckle, and next is a way to get a comedian really mad. Like, you're not funny is easier to deal with than next.
Wait, real quick before you finish that point, I wish I could remember which comic said it, but I remember a comic saying the worst heckler he got was this guy was sitting in the front row, and he wasn't yelling or anything, and he was just calmly watching the show, and the comic would do jokes, and he would just go, nah. And he's like, it hurt so bad. He said it was just a subtle like, nah. And he was like, I hated that guy. I wish he would have just said, you unfunny, stupid idiot. And he said that hurt so bad.
No, the more under control they are, the worse it is.
Yeah.
They're just stupid drunk. It's so easy to write it off or deal with it. But what I try to do is give them, this is like a cliche, but it works. It's like, give them enough rope to hang themselves. Mm-hmm. So they'll, whatever it is, I'll just be quiet. Like, I'll just give it silence, like the pregnant pause, and either ask something or try and let them follow up. And they're going to say something so stupid, or they'll be so nervous. And so they're so scared of that silence that they're going to screw it up bad enough that then you can just come over the top with whatever they just said is dumb. And then you'll get like people be like, you'll get this huge wave of laughter because the tension is so high at that point. And so I never like, even if it's a dude, I don't go after him for his clothes or what he looks like, or usually I just try to do like whatever they just said and why whatever they just said is wrong or dumb or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I'm actually going to take that in my life. I think the pause is great. I think they will expect
because they'll try to fill that silence
with
something because it's so uncomfortable for them, and especially if you challenge them and you ask, well, what would you say? Or like, if they go, that's not funny. It's like, well, what do you think is funny? Or just whatever.
Yeah.
And then they'll and then they'll say something stupid and then you've got a free shot. But
that's a much better way of handling it for sure.
But yeah, but just being like, because even if the dude's like 600 pounds, we're like, oh, okay, fat ass, how'd you roll yourself in here? Most people can't see the guy or who you're talking about. I mean, it's like there's a lot of disadvantages to just talking about their appearance anyway. So
exactly, and those are all great points. Just what you said too, because if you're in the front of the room and someone in the back's heckling, you can see them from stage, but they can't really see, or vice versa. So you're right. A lot of the apparent stuff is, and you can. The club doesn't, they don't like it. I've seen altercations on stage. I've seen plenty of comics say, come on up here. And the bottom of the mic stand, usually like a big heavy thing. Yeah. I saw Ian Bagg one time. It's like, come up here and see what happens. And the last time that I had a heckler, right before we went into this quarantine, I had a heckler. I had a drunk heckler. We had a combination of what we were talking about. I had a drunk heckler in the front row. That was he was having a good time, but he was so loud and he was interrupting the show. So I'd be playful with him, but kind of do some undermining digs at him that the crowd liked, and everything was going smooth. And then this guy, like 5 rows to the left, just goes, why don't you shut the fuck up and leave him alone? And I was like, what? I said, who are you talking to? And then I just lost it, right? Because then me and him are having a good time. What are you, his stepdad or something? I said, what's going on? So me and him go back and forth. And then his wife is just like, just tell jokes. Just please tell jokes. And I'm like, no, hold on. I'm going to talk to him real quick. And then he's like, why don't you come outside? And I was like, oh, I can't. I'm in the middle of the show. And then I was like, but if you keep talking, I'll fucking come off stage and I said, I'll choke you with that pretty little scarf you're wearing. And the crowd's going crazy. I could see my girlfriend get up from the back. She's panicked. The other comics that have never been in any trouble are panicking. I'm so mad at this dude that his wife leaves, goes to the front stand. She's crying. She's like, we're so sorry. We flew out here because, like I said, it was the beginning of the quarantine. They flew out here to go to some concert. It got canceled. They had dinner reserved. Everything got canceled, so they just ended up at my show, which wasn't even supposed to be my show. Bobby Lee canceled because of the quarantine. So this poor lady's like, we flew into town. This is all we could do tonight. I'm so sorry, because her husband had played the tough guy role, so he couldn't leave his seat. He had to sit there, even though she's trying to pull him out, because he had to stare at me the rest of the show. And me being a douche, I have to yell at him. And then then it ends, and I'm like, oh, and my girlfriend's so mad at me. She's like, what are you doing? You were so aggressive at him. I was like, but I think what bothered me is that it was none of his business. And those are the ones that always get me in trouble, when it's just out of left field.
Yeah, sometimes people, they're so, I don't know if it's what it is, but you can trigger them because they're like so socially awkward that even when you're not talking to them, you're talking to someone else, and they don't know that, like, as a comedian, we know we're going to land the plane.
Yeah.
This is going to go, eventually I'll get a little laugh here or whatever, and we'll get out of this, and I'll go back to my act, and it'll be safe for everybody. Everybody will be fine. Well, we won't leave on a weird note. Like, there'll be a big laugh, a big release of the tension. But like, they don't know that. When they see you doing stand-up, they're like, okay, eventually he's going to get to the punchline and everything's going to be okay. But when they see you talking to an audience member, they get so freaked out She's like, this is, I don't know what's going to happen, you know? And then I don't even think the guy could probably stop himself from going like, hey man, just do your act.
Yeah.
Just do the stuff that, you know, work, you know, like it drives them crazy. It's like, they're so uncomfortable with any sort of like conflict or something. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I've found that before too, where people, third parties just chime in because they just can't stand it anymore.
Yeah. And that's a mistake again. Like I made that night I was so mad that he just said that to me out of nowhere. But then eventually I lost the crowd. And that's a mistake I've made plenty of times of going too long at the heckler. And then when the rest of the crowd, like when you hear a move on, that's a bad sign.
Right. But then that just makes
like,
you
move on. Yeah.
And that just makes you madder. It makes you, because I've gotten that before. I've gotten the move on from like the third party, which is like you said, it's such a bad sign because the whole key to dealing with a heckler is keeping the 99% on your side. You want everybody with you and everyone teaming up against this one heckler. That's what you need. And once you start to lose a couple, then all of a sudden you get to like a 50-50 split, and that ain't good. That's not going to carry the show. So I've gotten the move on before. And when you get the move on, it makes you so much madder. You're like, no, I'm going to go far. I was going to move on. But you're going to tell me when to move on? It's like, I'm going to tell you when I move on. And then it's the show's over. I mean,
that might be another episode, but the problem with comedians is when you tell them not to do something, then they're just going to do it. So just like you said, when someone tells me to move on, I'm like, no, this is my show. You don't get to direct it. And,
or have you ever gotten this when you're dealing with someone interrupts you, and then so you make fun of them or you just deal with it the best you can. You talk to them a little bit, and then they start to get embarrassed because they look stupid now, and everyone's laughing at them, and then they go, okay, you can continue. You just go ahead and tell your jokes now. You can just keep telling your, like they decided that was enough. It's like, no, you don't get to decide. You interrupted the show. I'll decide what I say next. That's how this works.
No, yeah, that's a perfect example. Anytime you try to direct the show, that's the worst heckle. Those are perfect examples of like, that's when I really get mad for some reason. If you were like, you fucking suck or whatever, I like what you said and go, okay, then what would you joke about? And just let them, they're dead. But I had the same thing. I had a funny thing happen too. Like I said, I don't go hard at girls at all. I think it's really, it's just hard to get out of that hole. But I did say something. I forget what show it was. I said something to a girl that kept saying stuff. And then the crowd turned on me and I was like, guys, she's been awful the whole 15 minutes I'm up here. If you're here to see the headliner, she's going to do that. I'm trying to prevent this for the headliner. I'm like, this is for you guys, not me. And then they kind of got back on board, but I was like, she's ruining the show for all of us. And they were like, but the second, and I, cause trust me, I know not to like, cause when I started, if a girl said something, they'd be like, you fat slut, shut the fuck up. In the crowd would be like, whoa, he got her. And you say that now.
It's a different time.
People, there's some male feminists will start crying. I mean, everyone you're dead, man, if you, so I don't do that. But that was an interesting time I just thought of, was like, I had to remind the crowd, like, guys, I know you don't care about me, but I'm the warm up for the headliner. And this person's going to be awful during the headliner. If you don't, I'm trying to help you guys get your money's worth. And then they came around, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if like, I don't know what it is about the rest of the crowd, like what they expect from a comedian. I think they just want it to be nice. They just want it to be like, if anything happens, they just want it to be really funny and quick and then move on. And they want you to, but it's not a magic wand. You can't just like, because you can say the funny, quick thing, and then doesn't mean she's not going to spout off 2 seconds later, you know? Yeah. It doesn't. And then, so then it's up to the staff, I guess, to kick them out or whatever. But
yeah, that's like, the thing. You just have to toe that line. But like you said, there's been plenty of times when I hit him with a jab, hit him with a jab, hit him with a jab. And I was like, all right, then I'm going to have to go for the knockout. And then I hit the knockout, and then the crowd's like, we're not rooting for you anymore. I was like, you were just, I thought you wanted me to knock her out. They're like,
you know what it's like? It's like, there's I don't know if it's like a story or something, but like about, how on dog tracks, they would have the bunny, they all chase the bunny around or something. And And it's like, what happens if the dog ever actually catches up to the thing it's chasing? Because then there's some story where, like, the dog does one day and it kills it, and then it just looks up like, what did I do? You know? So you want to keep it like out there, just so the crowd is still, but you never want to actually sink your teeth in and murder the person, because then everyone's going to be like, I don't know. This analogy makes no sense. Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that it's just it's very comedy in general is very fragile. The whole thing, like the lighting, the sound, everything's got to be perfect for it to work, right? And dealing with a heckler is the same way. It's like, it's just very delicate, and anything over the top can throw the balance off to where the crowd turns on you, you know. And it doesn't mean that you're wrong either, you know. They just doesn't mean you're wrong at all. It just gets weird. It gets uncomfortable, and they want it to be comfortable.
Yeah.
More than anything, an audience just wants to be comfortable, and they want to assume that you're going to land this plane no problem, and everyone's going to laugh and clap at the end. They don't want any tension. They don't want any fights, you know.
Yeah. But if you're starting out, you're going to have to go through it a little bit at bar shows. But to be honest, once you get to the clubs, most clubs nowadays do a pretty good job of policing it, because they've
I mean, that's not going to be your biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
Like hecklers, we've talked about this already in a different episode, but like the talking to each other, not directing it towards you, that's going to be 99% of your problem compared to actual heckles. Is very little of it. You know, most people don't have the balls to actually yell something out, or they're so drunk that they're very easy to disarm.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. Like, I would much prefer a heckler that I can interact with than a table to the side of the stage just talking, where once again, the back of the room doesn't hear them talking. That's what drives me crazy, is that's like the worst kind of heckle, which they don't even realize they're doing. But when only I can hear them like close to the stage, and then I address it, and then people in the back are like, why were you mean to that table? I'm like, that table was talking the whole 45 minutes of my set.
And that's the one. There's no good answer for that. I don't even know what you do. I mean, that's when you hope that.
You hope the comedy club staff handles that. But I mean, let me look at my notes. But what I would say is, honestly, and you touched on it, like, you shouldn't really worry that much about hecklers, because, you know, you have the mic, you're louder than them, you're definitely funnier than them if you've even been doing it at all, and the crowd's rooting for you. So
the key, I think, that's all. That's the biggest key, is the crowd wants you. It's an easy target because the crowd is going to be more on your side than they've been at any point during the show. They want you to say the thing that shuts them up, or just that makes fun of them, and then they're going to really laugh because they were like, oh, we got to see this. That's kind of like an experience, like that's a take-home experience for them. Like, oh, we saw a heckler get shut up by the comedian. But
well, you know, I
just real quick though, I'd say, I think that when it goes wrong, like, it's always when you can see the comedian being angry. They don't want to see you be angry. I think you can be pretty mean or pretty dismissive as long as you're completely under control. Like, you don't let the emotions, but if you can visibly see somebody angry, it's hard to make it funny, you know?
Yeah. And then I guess the audience might think that they did get to you when they, you know,
right.
Like, then it's, so I think, you know, I'm going to definitely, because looking back on that last time, I got way too aggressive with the guy. And I think looking back on it, you're right. The second when the audience could tell how mad I was, that's when they all got nervous. And that's when I heard the move ons or just tell a joke. But I think what you said is the perfect way of handling it. Just, and the times I have handled it the way you said is much more, it's just a better situation. I think what the times I handled it like that is just being quiet and let them hang themselves. Then eventually the audience will turn on them and start heckling.
Yeah. And then you have like all these other support system where they'll fight them. I mean, I've had that where they're like big tough guys have had enough, like, I'll take you outside and beat your ass. But I was gonna say one more thing, but I anyway, I'll come back to it if I think of it. But I can't think of it.
But no, I think that's perfect. I think the silence is perfect because they're gonna panic in that silence. and you'll see, you'll eventually do a show where if the audience really likes you, if you're quiet, then you let them say something, then you jab them, and then they keep coming. Eventually, it usually is one big tough guy in the crowd that's just like, hey man, you better shut the fuck up before I come back there.
Right.
And then you get like the video you want on YouTube of your audience fighting not
Right.
coming.
Well, oh, okay. So this is, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that I think for me, the thing that just came to me just now was, I think the ultimate goal is to get your show back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you want to get a laugh from telling this person to be quiet, right? You want to deal with them and get the laugh, but ultimately your goal is, and I think that's the key to avoiding the rest of the crowd going like, all right, that's enough, or okay, move on to your jokes. And you're like, well, how do you know how much is too much? I think you only want to do enough to where you can get back to your show. And the second you can get back and move on, you should move on. I think. Yeah. And now they might keep spouting off, and then you've just got to decide like when it's like, okay, let's call security, or you can just leave, whatever your recourses are from there. But if you can get out of it quick, that's always the best.
Yeah.
Case scenario.
Which when it happens to you, do you try to get back into the bit, or you just go to the next bit?
I try to either incorporate it's great if you can incorporate what just happened in the bit. So if you like have a joke about your stupid friend forgetting to pick you up from the airport, then I would try to get back into it and be like, well, like somebody like this would be the stupid friend or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like use them as put them in the joke is a good way, because you can really do it in almost any joke. I mean, if you very loosely with the premise, but I try to take whatever just happened and put it in my joke, and then it just clicks people in, and you can usually just go right back into your act.
Yeah, that's great. If you can do that, that'll get you the biggest laugh of the night. If you diffuse the heckler, and then at some point you can just bring them back in. Best case scenario, they've kicked them out, and then you can go. You got one of those, like this guy, and they'll go crazy.
Well, and it's great for callbacks too. Like if you can remember, if you keep it and you stay present and you have it in the back of your mind, like it's great for a callback, like later in the show. Even if they've been kicked out, you can use it. If whatever happened fits in a different joke later, definitely try to fit it in, because it's like an easy big pop.
Yeah, I would say it's even better if they get kicked out, because the only thing you risk is if you do the callback to them, then you might go down that road again. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because then if you finally diffuse it, and then you go, or you got this shithead over here like Larry, then you set off the volcano. But
have you ever had it where they're like asleep? They're basically passed out, and then you say something like that, and then you've like awoken them, and then the rest of the crowd's like, God damn it, why would you even go back to it? It took them forever to get to sleep, and now you woke them up.
That's another great point, is like people always ask me about hecklers. The sleeping in the second row and stuff hurts way more than someone just drunk going, you suck. Or if you what, you'll get a lot of heckles if you put a sports team in one of your jokes, or even a city sometimes. I mean, you get the dumbest hecklers. Like one day I was doing a show in New York, well, fucking Boston, or the other way. Or if you ever have a sports team in there, it's just the dumbest. And that's a mistake I make, is like addressing that. I think, because if I say something about one of my teams and then they yell out their team, I can't address it. Sometimes I just would go idiot and just keep going, because if you ask about their team, or if their team, I've made that mistake a lot of like, but if you do have a team or even a city name, just be ready, because eventually some idiot's not going to like that team or city. Those are the kind of weird heckles you get more now, I think.
Yeah, and then that's so quick too, because that person isn't going to keep engaging. So I think exactly what you said, just like a one word, and then you can keep going.
But if heckling is one of your biggest concerns about doing stand-up, if you haven't done stand-up or you're just getting into it and you're still worried about that, I wouldn't worry. It's the least of your worries in this game.
And it's on the way out.
Yeah,
like you said, people are more and more afraid of confrontation. People don't even call people on the phone. It's like, I don't, it is less bad than it used to be. But you're right about the sleeping is worse. I had one time I was in Medford, Oregon, doing a show, and there's this lady in the back, and it was right before I was going to go on, and she had the paper, and I swear to God, she was reading the comic, like Archie. She's reading those comics. I was like, she was more entertained by the comic strip than the comedians on set. I was like, this is going to be a tough get.
I had a guy in Vegas that was second row, full asleep. I knew it right when I got up, and I just was like, just plow through, don't even acknowledge it. But then he started snoring so loud that I had to address it. And then and then those are the nights when you're like, what am I doing? I'll never write a joke good enough as pointing out that guy was sleeping. I mean, they thought it was so, I was like, guys, hold on. Can you hear this? And then he just like, and they just were like, they thought it was the greatest thing in the world.
Well, that's why you hold the mic up to the snoring too.
Yeah. But yeah. And here's another advice as if you're an audience member, they're never a plant. We never, that's another thing that drives me crazy. Did you put that guy in the audience that you like? No, that is, again, I mean, it's not even a rule in comedy because it's so absurd, but that's another thing that happens whenever I do deal with a heckler. The heckler either come up and tell and say, you're welcome. Like he did me such a huge favor. And then the rest of the crowd would be like, is he always with you? That's cool. You guys did that. I'm like, no, we don't. No one wants that ever.
Nobody wants that. Nobody's organized enough to make that happen. The pay isn't good enough to get two people on the one. You know what I mean? Like the booker's not paying for a plant. You know, so the whole thing is absurd.
Yeah, if you see a plant in a comedy club, it's a real plant. That's it. There's no, and you won't see that. I mean, you never have to ask someone if someone was planted because that goes against everything. First of all, we would rip comedians apart. If we found out somebody was using a plant, we'd be like, what is wrong with you? Just do your act.
It's absurd.
So yeah, I think we hit everything, but like we said, just to bring it back, don't worry about hecklers. You know, just be funny. Believe in yourself. Being funny. You're going to be louder. The crowd's on your side. And I love everything Andrew said. Just let them kill themselves.
And real quick, like, because you know, some people might think, well, certain styles are better at dealing with hecklers. Like, you know, if I'm Bobby Slayton or somebody, you know, I can take down a heckler easy because that's my style, and I'm loud and I'm aggressive. But if I'm, you know, Mitch Hedberg, right, it's harder because I'm, you know, more paced, slower, shy. But that's not true at all. Sometimes the people who are really slow or quiet or not aggressive can devastate a heckler way worse because people are more on their side. So any even like an eyebrow raise at a heckler, I'll get it like a huge laugh, you know? So if you're thinking like, oh, well, I'm bad with hecklers because of I would be bad with hecklers because of my style. Honestly, I think in some ways the shy, quiet comics deal with hecklers better because the crowd is so protective of them.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah, I agree because I could see somebody being like, well, I'm not that dude. You don't have to be that dude or girl. Like, it's just they're going to be on your side. And I mean, we didn't even address it here. A girl getting heckled, the crowd's really going to be on your side.
Yeah, but it's that same thing I was just talking about. Like, because there's aggressive women comics, you know, who you're probably like Lisa Lampanelli or whatever. You're like, oh, she's great with hecklers. She destroys them. But even comics who aren't aggressive like that, like Maria Bamford or somebody who's so nice, but if she gets heckled, she'd destroy a heckler too, just from you know. So it has nothing to do with style, I don't think.
Yeah. The crowd's going to be on your side no matter what, pretty much, unless you're just an awful comedian.
Yeah. Or if you actually are so unfunny, then I've seen that before. Where someone just is bombing so bad that they're just everyone is thankful for the heckler because like they're just saying what we're all thinking.
Yeah, this is advice for like 1, maybe 2 hecklers. If you get like around 5 or 10 hecklers, just wrap it up. There's no getting out of that.
Right, you're outnumbered.
That means you're not doing good.
Yeah,
because you're right. I guess I've seen a crowd turn on people, but I didn't call that heckling. I just called that. I just called. It's about to be chaos.
That's just called show's over.
Yeah,
that's called wrap it up.
Well, that's another episode. Hopefully, we answered you guys' heckling concerns. We don't worry about it. Just go out there and you'll be fine.
Thank you for not heckling us during this.
Thanks. I'm sure
Appreciate
the
it,
comments will be full of people heckling us, and we will we will do exactly what Andrew said and not acknowledge them. But if you have any questions for the show or just want to connect with us, you can find me at Brandt Tobler, BrandTTobler. And Andrew?
At Andrew Slater, AndrewSleighter.
So we hope you guys are enjoying the shows. If you're enjoying the show, please, if you're watching on YouTube, just subscribe. We'll be putting out new episodes every single week. If you're listening to the podcast on the audio, please subscribe, rate, comment, do all that on iTunes and Spotify. And like we said, if we missed something in this episode, if you have a question or if there's something you want us to get to, we're probably going to get to it. We have about, I think, 90 episodes laid out right now, but it never hurts to, we're always open to anything. So if you have something you'd like us to talk about, send it in and we will definitely do it. So until next time, I'm Brandt.
All right, I'm Andrew.
See ya.
See ya.